Hi, welcome back. Sorry about that. We lost Wi-Fi, so we had to take a minute and reconnect. I had just asked Tamie what priorities she might want to set for the city, and we got cut off just as she was answering, so I'm going to let you go ahead and
Thank you.
do that again.
Okay, I touched earlier on my experience and intent to focus on the opiate epidemic and my concerns about poverty and economic inclusion. And in addition to that, just generally, I think, the day-to-day things that we really need to do a better job of is providing transportation to jobs. So I think we really need to look more regionally at our metro and SORTA system and how that's working. I realize that we have a deficit in our city budget, and we need to be fiscally responsible at every turn. And when money is found, direct it to things that we know need more attention. And I would say basic services. Those would be my priorities.
Oh, great! Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And a lot of our members would like to know how would you address the needs of all your constituents, and not just a particular party or group?
I love that question. I'm running as an independent. Mm-hmm. My entire career, I have worked with Democrats and Republicans both. There are times when I agree with Republicans and times when I agree with Democrats. And I think that the most important group to serve are the voters and the constituents. Actually, not just the voters, because I think a lot more people need to vote. So go vote. I hope you'll vote for me, but definitely go vote. So the constituents in the city, I feel like I can definitely serve all of them, especially not being beholden to a party.
Okay. So, of course, the reason this question was asked is because there is such a big political divide right now. Do you have any ideas about how you might heal that?
Oh, I just think we need to get in the room together. I mean, I know that even some of our most difficult issues, and I'm not going to give examples, but get political. Somebody wants to take credit for something, or somebody won't help because it's the other party that started. And I can't work that way. I've never worked that way. I'm a collaborator. I build coalitions, and we just have to keep talking to each other. And actually, maybe this is as good a time as any, but when it comes to diversity, I think the last great area of diversity that we really need to talk about is socioeconomic class, because when we're talking about race, it's not necessarily people who work together and are used to spending time together. There's more that distrust and misunderstanding between groups that live in very segregated, different neighborhoods.
Okay. And along those same lines, how can you guarantee that you'll be working for the voters and not for special interests?
Well, I will always make the decision that's best for everybody. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. I know that there are issues like, when a developer wants to develop something in a neighborhood and there's neighborhood redevelopment, and there's a certain group that wants to make sure that affordable housing is included, and I get all those issues, and that's why I believe I'm so qualified to do this, because I really get both sides, and I think there are ways to have win-wins. It doesn't need to be win-lose.
So here's the tough question now.
Okay.
So how do voters hold you accountable, and how do you want them to communicate with you?
Well, they hold public officials accountable by voting. You can vote if anyone who's in office on city council out, by not voting for them. And so for me, I get in there, I will make the right decision, not so that I will get reelected, but make the right decision because it's not, the only thing that I am. and that I will be serving the community. I've always been a servant leader, and I see this role this exact same way.
So we talked about how things get political.
Yes.
In City Council.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you specifically work with the council and local government to move the city forward?
I think a lot of people want the same things. I mean, you can't find anyone who would disagree probably with the things I've said. It's how to get there. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to find the common ground to get there. And I think it's very possible, even when things are so polarized, because while things obviously coming out of the last presidential election have created deep divides in our country, in our communities, we can be the community that we want to be. We can be the welcoming community that decides, you know, how we want to behave and treat each other and move the city forward in a positive way.
All right.
Civility.
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 If you're just joining us after our little break over a technical glitch, please do ask us questions. I will stop and ask. All you have to do is comment on the video feed with your question. And again, we are here with Tamie Sullivan, candidate for Cincinnati City Council, and you get a glimpse of Betsy, our interpreter today from Cincinnati State University. We do have a question from the viewership. Okay, do you have any specific ideas on how to tackle the child poverty issue in Cincinnati?
Yes. First of all, child poverty is family poverty. It's more acceptable, I think, to talk about the children, but the whole family is in poverty. So the issues that I think we need to address as a community are affordable housing, and I think we need to be creative with that. I don't know that we can legislate it. We need transportation to get people to jobs. We need higher paying, livable wage jobs, which I know many people in our community are working very hard on bringing new manufacturing and opportunities for people and families. And we need to continue to work with the children, you know, to break the cycle, because we are talking about generational poverty that's very complicated. But I think that would be enough to say about how I would approach that issue. I've worked with organizations like St. Vincent de Paul and Lighthouse Youth Services, and I do understand how challenging it is with the child welfare system, and those young people when they age out. Fortunately, we're changing that age from 18 to 21 in our state, and that's going to provide some additional protection. But we need to, one thing I left out that's really important is reentry. I actually sat at the table when St. Vincent de Paul was deciding whether or not to participate in a national reentry model that was being sponsored by the Archdiocese, and they could either do it or not do it. It was an opportunity, and I was so pro that project, and they did decide as a board to move forward with that, and I think that's super important.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by reentry?
Reentry. Well, I believe that we cannot have somebody come out after paying their debt to society, that's how we put it, and then have their lives ruined for the rest of their life. I mean, there's been national re-entry legislation, but we have to make sure that we're tending to that locally and getting more and more businesses to provide that second chance, and to collaborate with the organizations that are doing that. There's Hamilton County Reentry, and then the program I mentioned at St. Vincent de Paul, and Nehemiah is a manufacturer downtown that has made that their mission, that they hire folks coming out of prisons. So I think that's another did I explain that enough?
Yes.
Okay, great.
That's good. Thank
Thanks.
you. We have a couple more questions, but I want to follow up.
Okay.
I kind of asked a two-part question, and then we got cut off, so I wanted
Okay.
to ask again. How do you want constituents to communicate with you?
I only have a cell phone for my office, so I'm going to give you the email, and you could tweet at me too. I would love that because I'm always on social media. But my email is sullivan4cincinnati@gmail.com, and my website provides a way to communicate that through email as well, and it's sullivan4cincinnati.com. And then I should say the Twitter handle is Sullivan4, the number 4, Cincy.
Okay.
Yes.
And that's Cincy with a Y at the end?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thanks.
All right. And you're good with constituents emailing you or using
Absolutely.
your website?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Please.
Okay.
Yes.
We have a question about the streetcar.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of people want to know about the streetcar, of course. What is your view on expanding it?
I think there are other priorities. I would not, if there was a study done, I would be interested in what was learned. However, I'm much more concerned about our bus system, and I also believe that we're going to have driverless cars before too long. So I really think that transportation needs to be multimodal, and consider some of those more cutting edge issues. Like I've learned that the first mile and the last mile of where you're going is the most challenging, and so people are starting to come up with solutions. Whether that's the Uber and Lyft kind of ideas, and I just want to think a lot more creatively than just the streetcar. However, I will say the streetcar that we have needs to be successful, and I think City Council has a responsibility to do everything it can to promote it, have it be something that's very much an artery that people use, along with other things. They may hop on a red bike, after they get off the streetcar. There's lots of options.
For those who don't know what a red bike is, will you just briefly
Sure.
explain?
It was started by a Leadership Cincinnati class. I can't remember which one. But there are bike stations throughout Cincinnati. I know it goes the banks up to OTR. I'm not sure how far out from there, even across the river. And you just hop on a bike and rent it for that time or have a monthly pass. I don't have one actually, but I know a lot of people do and enjoy it.
And there's just like little stands of bikes located strategically, and you can pick one up and then drop it off.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
Okay. Another question from the viewer. She would like to know if you would explain why you moved from being a Republican to an independent.
I would love to. I'm fiscally responsible and socially liberal. I mean, that's sort of the soundbite answer. But overall, I explained earlier that I've always worked with both sides of the aisle. And with how divisive things are right now, I literally had friends who wouldn't support me if I put one label or another on myself, which says a lot. Kind of makes me sad, but I'm really comfortable with doing that because I've always, some of the core social issues, I've always been more liberal anyway, and I don't have to change that. I don't have to change anything about myself to be independent. I can be 100% what I believe and where I think a lot of people are too. A lot of people agree.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump a little bit. You have been a big advocate, I'm trying to figure out the right way to put it, for people who have drug abuse issues. Okay, so we have a big heroin epidemic. You've mentioned it already.
Right.
And we have other drug issues too in the area. So what is your plan?
We definitely need to change the conversation from drug addiction being a personal failing to being part of the body, and it's something that's ailing you and you need treatment if you're addicted to drugs. And you know, whether that's what we're talking about now with the most current epidemic, which if anyone's read Dreamland, you know, it'll tell you how we got to this perfect storm and why we're here. But I would say that I have written a plan, and I know I didn't have too long to explain everything, but there's 4 pillars: prevention, education, treatment, law enforcement, and recovery. And years ago when I was involved, recovery wasn't a column, but the opiate epidemic is different. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before, and it's so important for when somebody comes out of treatment to have a strong recovery community. Prevention, education, I'll spend just a minute there. We can use the neighborhood community councils more to disseminate prevention information. I mean, when I go, everyone's concerned about it, but they don't know what to do. Prevention, we used to talk about prevention as keeping somebody from starting to use drugs in the beginning. Now prevention is keeping somebody from dying. So clearly our conversation has changed dramatically, and I'd like to get back to how important it is to keep people from going down that path to begin with. So prevention, the community councils, and I would like to frankly serve as the city council representative in any partnerships that, you know, that we have, because this is not an issue that's going to be solved by city council. It's an issue that's going to be solved by everybody in our community: law enforcement, physicians, the faith community, schools, parents. Everybody has a role.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to learn more about your plan, is it available on your website?
It's not on my website because it was maybe too much information, but email me and I'll email it for sure. If I could put it up, I'll figure it out. It's definitely available.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And are you okay if people have follow-up questions on that, if they can add it after the interview? Would you be willing to take a peek? And
yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Appreciate that. I'm gonna hop back to some general questions about Cincinnati's health and well-being. So you mentioned this being a city of inclusion and welcoming. How do you feel about the sanctuary city status, and would you keep it?
I think that we were already a sanctuary city before we named ourselves a sanctuary city. I am very involved in the Christian, Muslim, Jewish dialogue group. Mm-hmm. We discuss these issues at length. I think sanctuary city became very hyper-partisan. I believe that we have a history of providing sanctuary in Cincinnati, and we absolutely should be those people and live up to that. I don't know if we should have put a target on our backs. That's the only thing I'll say, because you know, things are contentious right now. And although the last thing I've heard is that really there's no way to keep federal dollars and federal grants from coming to Cincinnati because we've named ourselves, because City Council named us a sanctuary city. So hopefully that's true.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay. And another general...
if you want to drill down on immigrants, I'm happy to do that, because that's the whole point.
Okay, if we drilled down, what would you cover?
Well, I think that it's not the local law enforcement's job to work for ICE. And so that's why, I believe that the things that our CPD is doing, and you know, and the community that we live in, frankly, we don't have that many Hispanic immigrants here. The population's only 3%. So I just don't want to have a heightened sense of those people not belonging here, because I really believe we need immigration reform, and you know, if somebody's a criminal, send them back. But those are the only people that I really believe should be deported. So that's the drill down.
Well, thank you.
That helps.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
Good to elaborate.
Yeah.
And another general question about Cincinnati's well-being is, how would you take on racial healing for the city?
I think that the collaborative agreement is very important, and the fact that we're revisiting that right now and going through that process is sort of the next step in healing, to have a check on what's been happening so far. But I know that it's very real that African Americans in certain neighborhoods are more afraid of the police. It's sort of and I think the police are doing an incredible job of community policing, and that's like the most important thing. I think CPD has taken us so far, and as some of these other things have happened around our country, I believe that we were kind of light years ahead, even though we still have a ways to go, believe me, I know that. But it was comforting to know that we had addressed a lot of the things that we saw coming out of Ferguson years ago. And hopefully we'll keep moving that ball down the field. Now, personally, I do things to put myself in uncomfortable positions. And I think we all need to do that. We all need to, I go to a black church where I'm one of 2 white people sitting there for an event. And I would promote that kind of bridge building, even though that's like the soft things that a city council person does, just by leading by example or talking about issues. It's not necessarily something you legislate, but that's who I am.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We spoke a little bit about childhood poverty, which is, of course, also family poverty. So tell us a little bit about how you would approach education, making sure that the schools are equitable for all the students, regardless of race, regardless of economic class. How would you, as a city council member, influence that?
As a city council member, that's tough, and especially since there's a school board.
Right.
We need to collaborate for sure, and I think that we have a certain responsibility because it's part of the taxpayer dollar. Taxpayers, when we're looking at sort of the sum total of what they're paying, they're also paying for the schools and in the most recent levy that was passed. And I think the preschool promise needs to be held accountable as they're moving forward. I think it's a great idea. I don't want to see responsibility while there's an opportunity to provide things for an education and preschool for children who wouldn't have it otherwise. I understand that. But I don't want to pull away that responsibility from the parents, because the bottom line is that we need more diverse communities. And I have seen the beautiful parents. I go to Rockdale Academy in Avondale weekly, who care and are involved in their children's lives and their children's education. But there are some in that generational poverty cycle that are struggling. There's trauma involved with all the things that are happening in their lives and just, the day-to-day living. And that affects the whole family. So I would say providing equitable education is absolutely paramount. It's challenging if we don't take advantage of the opportunity to have more families moving to the city. Our population has dropped significantly since 1990, and that's people moving out. We want them to come back in, and diversity, and I think that will make a difference.
So if people are moving out, are you saying they're going to the suburbs? Or?
They're going to the suburbs, and a lot of people will say they're moving out because of schools.
Okay.
That disturbs me, but that's, I'm aware of that, and I want, for a variety of reasons, not just to care for the kids in our community, make sure they're having an equitable education, but also making the schools attractive so that, people want to move into the city and raise their families. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah.
Okay, good.
I just, if people aren't sure where the people are going, they
Right.
might be going to another state or...
Oh no, yeah, I know. I just meant sort of outside the
Okay.
city proper. Because we all think we're from Cincinnati, but there, are very defined CPS lines for the city.
Right. for those who don't know what Preschool Promise is, can you just like very briefly explain?
Yes, funding was added to the most recent Cincinnati Public Schools levy to also provide preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds throughout the entire CPS district. It's pretty cutting edge. We followed the model in Colorado, I believe, it helps kids get to the level that they need to be at. I think 3rd grade is that sort of, cutoff where the kids need to be reading and all at the same level. And if they've had quality, and that's the key word, quality preschool, then they're more assured of getting there.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate
Sure.
you explaining that. And I think now is a really good time for me to mention that we are continuing our Q&A series with school board candidates coming up in June. So if you have questions for school board candidates, please let us know, because we would love to put your questions on the list of things that we ask the candidates in our upcoming series. And again, if you're just joining us, I wanted to remind you, please do ask questions of Tamie Sullivan. All you have to do is comment on the video feed. And if you are not catching the entire broadcast, that is okay, because we will put a recording up and you can watch the whole thing later, catch up if you need to. Tamie, we talked about Cincinnati Police Department and community policing. And we talked about the collaborative agreement. Mm-hmm. Could you just review for people what the collaborative agreement is?
Following the civil unrest after the shooting and death of Timothy Thomas, there were federal sanctions, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not going to have all the exact terminology, but a consent agreement was drawn up mm-hmm. that the community and Cincinnati Police Department would work together on these steps, to improve community-based policing, problem solving, a variety of issues were laid out. And what's really cool about it is the community and CPD work together to move mm-hmm. that forward.
Okay. Does it include training for law enforcement officers on such things as de-escalation or against unconscious bias, how to deal with domestic abuse, mental illness?
I believe it does. I don't know the specifics about that, and I know that officers are constantly getting more training mm-hmm. on those kinds of things. Can I just tell a personal story?
Of course.
Okay. I have a 20-year-old with high-functioning autism, and he is in college, and he drove to go to work one day, and he left, and then there was a police officer at my door, and I didn't know why. And he asked if the car belonged to us that he had followed or heard about, and he had accidentally run through I remember what happened. He didn't stop when the officer tried to stop him. And I explained to him that my son was autistic, and because they were ready to go into his place of work and arrest him. And it was a conversation that I so appreciated, because it seemed like he was willing to have that conversation and understand. So anyway, I was really impressed by that.
Oh, good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
And that was in this area?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. As a city council member, is there anything that you would implement to help prevent any kind of officer-involved shootings, such as the Sam DuBose shooting, for instance?
Well, I think everything that can be done has been done. That was a horrific situation, and something that was done by a UC as we all know, a UC officer, and they've created a lot of changes in their police force, their campus police force, and all I can hope is that something after that tragic incident, something like that would never happen again.
We have a question from a viewer. She asks, what do you think about the criminal prosecution, including jail and house arrest, of lower income homeowners for not being able to afford to make home and property repairs in Cincinnati? Would you work to change this practice?
Yes. I understand that we're trying to reduce neighborhood blight. However, if you can't get blood out of a turnip, and if you're asking somebody to fix something that they can't, I think we need to have a better understanding of the required permits, the level of contractor that you end up needing to hire when you get the permit, and then you have to have somebody who's going to charge more than somebody else, or there's people working cooperatively that might be able to help somebody like that, but we don't seem to have a system where we're making sure that the folks who really, they're homeowners. We want homeowners. We want more homeowners. Homeowners pay taxes. We don't want to sanction them.
Thank you. And again, if you have questions for Tamie Sullivan, please comment on the video feed with your question, and I'd be happy to stop and ask. So we've talked a little bit about the heroin epidemic. Mm-hmm. There's kind of a health disparity in the area, and especially a lot of our members are really concerned about the federal defunding of Planned Parenthood, which isn't going to help. So is there anything City Council can do to help alleviate that health disparity?
Do you want me to talk about, well, the health disparity is very real. The mission of our Cincinnati Health Department, which actually started, I looked this up, in 1826. We've been caring for people who need health care in the city for a long time. And we need to continue to do that. I think that we need better collaboration with the health department, maybe when it comes to the opiate epidemic. I don't know. I know they've started some prevention work. I also know they are not able to provide medically assisted treatment, which is something that's very helpful for opiate addicts. So there may be some improvements we could make there when it comes to the epidemic, and other people being able to access treatment, but the poorest people not. We definitely have a shortage of treatment beds, and that's something that's been widely talked about. So skipping on to Planned Parenthood, I'm very concerned about that as well. The only thing I can think of is that if it were really defunded, that the city or local government would have to step up to figure out how those services are provided, because those are contraception services for our poorest residents. And it makes absolutely no sense to not provide that important women's health care, as well as access to abortion, which that rate has been going down. Mm-hmm. We don't need to change what's working. It's working. We have Roe v. Wade. It's in place. It's a woman's right. It's her body. Decision between herself and her physician and her family and God, and that's what I believe.
Okay, thank you. We're about at 8:20, I think, which means we'll be wrapping up in a few minutes. So if you have any questions, please slip them in under the wire so that we can make sure we ask. I'm going to jump a little bit in topic to water and water treatment.
Oh, this is mine, yeah.
How are the Mill Creek and Ohio Rivers doing? Can you talk a little bit about the quality of water and the state of our water treatment plants?
I actually can't.
Oh.
I mean, honestly, I know because of the work I've done, I know a little about a lot of things, and I can drill down on some things, but the local environment, I care about environmental issues, but I'll admit my entire career, I've learned to be a quick study. That's something I would have to really dig in on before I had much of a position.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but if you want to follow up and you have a question, I promise I will look into it.
Okay.
Okay.
And you've seen our list of questions, so you know people also asked about the county and city cooperation on the sewer system.
Well, that I get. We just bottom line, we need to cooperate, and the city may need to just focus on clean water. I mean, the city is doing that well, and MSD really is more in the county camp. And I know that a mediator has gotten involved. We have so many other issues and problems. I would like to see, we've got some new people in place who, in various elected positions, and maybe, after this election we could, although we're running out of time, but I just think we need to resolve that as quickly as possible, because it's costing money as we, don't start fixing that multi-billion-dollar fix that we've told the federal government we're going to do. We just need to get moving.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll turn it over to you in case you have any concluding remarks. I'm going to ask about, we've talked about public transportation. So some of our members really want to know about accessibility in public transportation, and as well as in public facilities, like for instance the jails, City Hall, TTY and Relay, and interpreters and captions for live events, and thanks again to our ASL interpreters. Do you have anything in mind that you would look at to improve, say, let's just pick bus accessibility?
And are we talking mostly about somebody who's physically disabled, or people who are poor and need to be able to get the bus to go somewhere?
I think our membership is concerned with both.
You're right. Well, I mean, there are probably budget concerns with those things, and I have not seen a priority list of where we're at and what needs to happen, but I'm very familiar with the ADA. I've lived a life, which I mentioned earlier, of what it's like to have a family member who has special needs. I'll just put it that way. And so we need to be, when I say we need to be welcoming and friendly and all of that, we need to, cover everybody that we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap up and let Tamie speak, but I wanted to remind you that we will put a recording of this Q&A session on our website, and you are welcome to catch up later if you didn't catch all of it. Again, this is Together We Will, Cincinnati, Southwest Ohio, and we are here with Tamie Sullivan, who is running for Cincinnati City Council. Just really quick, I'd like to thank Betsy and Jessica from Cincinnati State University for interpreting for us today. Thank you. And Tamie, what would you like to say in conclusion?
Thank you, Nicole and Jessica. And, I want to say again that we're here in Sidewinder Coffee in Northside because the neighborhoods are really the fabric of Cincinnati. We have 52 very distinct neighborhoods, and yet we're all one Cincinnati. And I really do believe that we can move forward with some priorities that will help our entire community move forward. I think that's very important. So I am going to continue, like all the candidates, I'm sure, to be in the neighborhoods. And we're here tonight. I'm going to start choosing a coffee shop one morning here and there, and if you have suggestions, tweet me or email me or something, so I can just set up camp and chat with people and then walk the business district or whatever. So I'm going beyond the community council meetings. I think that that's really important. I have set the opiate epidemic as a priority issue for me. I would say if you're concerned about that, I ask you to please make me your first choice vote. You have 9 candidates you can vote for. You can certainly vote for 8 others, but if that's a priority issue for you, it's definitely a priority issue for me, and I do think that there's more we can do. I would be honored to serve. I see this purely as something that I would see as just the utmost honor to be part of and to take everything that I've done as a culmination to City Hall. So I really appreciate this opportunity tonight. Thank you
for being
for
with
everyone
us.
out there. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.